variety is the spice of life and
I wanted to make an album. This is the first album that I've made of totally new original songs in 10 years, since probably Open All Night in 1999. So I've gone through lots of different phases, as anybody would in a 30-year career. To last 30 years, I think you've got to diversify. And I've kind of gone through the electronic stages, through rock, through kind of more glam pop, electro pop, sort of more folk references, chanson styles. But to me, they've always been very much me. And I think people would have been very, if I've done the same thing again and again for 30 years, I wouldn't have lasted very long. So everything always has me at the very heart of it. I like to create characters with my songs, and they're not always, they have elements to them that are personal elements about me, but they're not always about me. I do kind of blur the lines. I suppose I write a lot of retrospective songs now, if that's the right word. Songs that are looking back, because I suppose because there's more to look back on than there is to look forward to, in a way. That's, so I suppose you do kind of tend to look back on past experiences, and I do tend to look back a lot on my adolescence and childhood, because those are the times that kind of left lasting impressions with me. Those growing up times. I'm kind of reaching a stage now where I'm kind of reaching. I've got to stop doing that. I have to end that phase now, and I have to move on from that. I have to move on from these places that I've set my songs in, and this world that I've set my songs in for so long now. And variety, in a way, is capturing all that, and in a way saying goodbye to it. A track like on the album, like Soho So Long, for example. I've written so many songs about Soho, so many songs that are set in Soho songs. I visited Soho, first of all, in about 1978, 79. I worked for a while in Soho. I lived in Soho for about 9 or 10 years in the 80s. And it was a kind of a world that I was immersed in. The Soho that I know is not my Soho anymore. It was a huge influence to me, because it was this little world that was this microcosm, this of life. Soho so long, Soho so sad, Soho so gone, Soho farewell. The good times that we had. And I've written so many songs about that. I felt it was time to say goodbye to those kind of songs and to that kind of red light world, if you like, that neon lit world that I've set so many of my albums in for the past 30 years. And I felt I had to say goodbye to it. So variety, in a way, is a saying goodbye. And hence you get songs like Swan Song at the end, which is kind of saying goodbye to kind of part of myself, in a way. I come from Southport. I worked in pantomimes and on the fairground when I grew up. I always looked at myself as a bit of a singing hustler, hustling this and hustling that. And I met actors when I was very young. My first relationships were with somebody who played a clown and somebody who played a pantomime giant. So it was a kind of Fellini-esque life that was kind of really kind of happening, and I suppose I then sort of became this sort of person, and I was always sort of fascinated then by the more seamier side of theatrical life. And which is why I was more interested in the more faded performer, who I always felt was more glorious and more interesting than the performer that was on their way up. They've got success ahead of them. Success is not very interesting. I think when you do get older, you are drawn back to the things that are comforting to you. And I think that's a lot about variety as well. And I also with variety, I mean, especially things like variety and circus and fairground and burlesque, these days are very much buzzwords of our time. And I think it's about because we're so surrounded by complicated technology, so many complicated things. Life is so complicated and so expensive. It's so out of our reach all the time, difficult to deal with. And I suppose with the recession as well, we're now going back to forms of entertainment that are so much more lo-fi, so much more less complicated, so much easy access, kind of cheaper forms of entertainment that are more human, that are more real. I mean, Britain's Got Talent is a popular show on the TV where people feel that they can go on and they can do something and show something that they're good at, maybe sort of walking on a balloon or something, or balancing something on the head, or or juggling dogs or something, you know. But it's that thing that people everybody feel it's what it is. It's become the new kind of accessible way to fame. Variety has become a new accessible way for people to find fame, or burlesque has been another way. Accessible way to fame, or cabaret has been a resurgence. But I think people forget that and it's kind of diluted it a lot, I think, as well, because to be a good sort of cabaret performer or a good burlesque performer, there are really some great, brilliant performers who have fine-tuned it and honed it. And there's a lot of kind of people, it's not enough just to sort of take your clothes off and dance around with a fan. I always thought variety was something that was rehearsed brilliantly. And even if you do that one thing, it has to be done absolutely brilliantly.
Life can be just one thrill after another.
I think variety is very much a song cycle, more than a concept album. I suppose you could call it a concept album, but it's more of a song cycle. I like to approach all my albums as if they're kind of like an imaginary show in my head. But it very much is an album about kind of that takes you on this musical journey. You can listen to from beginning to end.
Lavender, he's got a touch of lavender. Lilac and lavender.
Lavender was, I suppose, all my kind of icons and music, sort of musical and film and fashion, everything icons. I always felt when I look back at them, always had a touch of lavender. And you're not talking about people like Quentin Crisp who were kind of obvious. There was this kind of thing of like the 50s and 60s, again, this black and white time, you know, even going into the 70s of people who, like old ladies used to refer to as, oh, he's got a touch of lavender, or he's a bit light on his feet. You know, he's a bachelor. You know, he's never married. And when you look back on those times now, you look back and, you know, with your eyes opened, and you look back at all the kind of film stars and go through the film stars and the TV personalities of that time. There was so much lavender around, and it was people, I suppose, at an age that people who came from that age, and I suppose I came from that time, crossed over in a crossover time, really, from that time. And you do get kind of bruised and scarred by that time. You became, as I say, kind of poisoned by your time.
Lavender.
I think it's important to point out that what I wanted to do with this album very much was to make a band album. An album using, at its core, a band. Because I hadn't done that since the end of the 80s. I kind of got bogged down by computers and bogged down by samples and computers and all these things. And though I still like samples and I still like that side of it, I wanted to make a very organic, warm album that was recorded in an old-fashioned way. Like you used to just do a demo, you rehearse the song, and then you record it. And you record it all in a short period of time, and then bring in guest musicians to add little exotic touches and things. So it was very much to have a live album at its core that I could go out and play live, and in a way that was the kind of a very 70s reference as well. I wanted to make an album that would almost sound a bit like a 70s record, and I wanted to reference a lot of that on Variety.
Fantastic! I absolutely can't wait to see it.
If I could do one thing, I'd do it for you.